Yes, I'd like to second that. Thank you for coming. Thank you. I need to remember to say something about the Twin Trails today, because my talk when I was in London at Alternatives was entitled The Twin Trails, and I got to the end of the talk and realised I'd forgotten to mention the Twin Trails. So I'm going to say something about the Twin Trails quite close to the beginning. And I'm also going to say something quite close to the beginning about this, which is, I guess in a way, is why I was invited here, because I am a local holistic author. The book was written about 4 years ago, and it is essentially has 3 layers to it. The first layer is that it's my story. I had a little bit of an interesting start to life. My mum died when I was very young. My dad remarried, and my stepmom was pretty angry and struggled with all the children that weren't hers and stuff, so home wasn't a safe place. So low self-esteem, not feeling very worthy and all that sort of stuff. Left home, went off the rails, blah, blah. All got a bit chaotic. Drugs, crime, violence, homelessness. So it's kind of about that story, but it's about that story. The story begins when I left home, because I wanted it to be about when it was my choices, when I was in the driving seat, and it was about the choices that I made that led me through my life journey, if you like. I didn't want it to be about, the crap that had happened when I was a kid. It was like, and people sometimes say, was it really cathartic writing it? And it wasn't terribly cathartic writing the book, because I felt to a large extent I'd dealt with all that stuff, and I didn't want to go into it. It wasn't because I was avoiding it. It was just, it's a bit poor me. Because, I think there are 2 levels all the time. There are 2 levels, or I've heard the other speakers allude to them today, and it's really interesting. There's a bigger picture or a higher level. So there's Miguel and my story, and there's this person. And at the same time, on another level, there's a much bigger picture, and there is this soul, this spirit, this consciousness that looks out from behind these eyes, that hears from behind these ears, and is eternal and that has always been here. So there's the little Miguel story, which I don't choose to attach to and get too into these days, because I don't want to give it a lot of energy. I'm still asked to give it energy. I'm still asked to speak about it in schools and different places. But I guess in a way, this is the unveiling of my new pull-up banner, which is in a way, the encapsulation of what's moving in me now. And what's moving in me now, in particular, is a real fascination and a real curiousness that my story just seems to hold so many parallels to humanity's story, to the extent that there doesn't seem to be any difference. And I don't know anymore really what's out there and what's in here and what's in here and what's out there. So it's kind of, when I've listened to the other speakers today, I felt, they're so articulate and so sort of well-read, and some of the terms that they've used, that wonderful term, perennial, what's the second word? Perennial message? Wisdom, yeah. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, I like that. And my life seems to have been like that, where I've experienced stuff, and I don't know what it's called. And then I hear somebody say, it's this model, or it's this word, or it's that. And it's like, bang, that's it. That's what I'm experiencing. That's what I've kind of realised, or the insights that have come to me through my own way of living, I guess, in a kind of reflective way. Because I see life as a journey, and life is an opportunity, and life is about learning. And if you like, life really starts learning. The learning really starts when you leave school. That's when it really starts getting interesting. And to what extent is our journeys all about the unlearning rather than the learning? Because when we come back to that place, for those that were in the room just a little while ago with Tim Freke, that is just seeing and witnessing and feeling the consciousness of another person, there is no place for learning or wisdom or intellect in that place. And it seems increasingly that kind of stuff, it can get in the way, and it can lead you down these dead ends and on these red herrings and stuff. And it's just all so simple. And it's also simple because it can all be encapsulated in the word love. with all its myriad connotations and, layers and facets. And that was interesting as well, that Richard Abbott was talking about love through the medium of numbers and words. And then Tim Freke was talking about it through, more sort of traditional spiritual stuff and meditation and the consciousness and so on. And my arriving in that place, because we're all on these journeys, and we're all, all roads lead to Rome, don't they? But we all have our own way to get there. We've all been gifted with our unique stories, with our unique experiences. So the second layer of my book, beyond the story, is that at the end of each chapter there are life lessons, what I've called life lessons, which are also in bold in the text of the story. And those life lessons are just little pieces of wisdom and insight that life has gifted me, that I have learned along the way. And the key reason for writing the book was because for a long time it was just kind of like, well, it's just my story, it's not a big deal, nobody's going to want to read about my story, I don't know anybody else's story, I only know my thing, and it is what it is. But people said, you've got an interesting story. And it arrived at the point that it felt as if it would be selfish of me not to share it. Because I realised the power of our stories and how important it is, and that when we share our stories, one of the beautiful things is there's this big sigh that takes place in us and kind of says, it's not just me. Someone else has got a bit lost. Someone else has messed up. Someone else has got confused. Someone else has done things that they regret. It's okay. And that's what it is to be human, and that's what it is that helps us, I so believe, helps us arrive at this place where we realise the true nature of what it is to be alive, and what a gift it is to be in these bodies. When we pause to just feel that and just witness it and be aware of it. So the third layer of the book kind of blends into that, because the book in a way was an experiment in vulnerability and honesty. Because I wanted to write it exactly as it was, exactly as it happened, without censoring it, writing it without filters. And the reason for that was because I wanted it to be cathartic, in the sense that I didn't want to be ashamed of anything that had happened. Because I'd noticed that I had been ashamed for a long time. When I started working for myself, lots of different times. When I came off the road, when I stopped living on the streets, and I signed on at the first counselling course, because the counsellor that I saw had just blown me away with his compassion and his care and just this simple thing of being heard. And when I was there, I just felt that all my past and my story was this dirty little secret. I was terrified that people would find out about it, who I really was, what I'd been through, what I'd done. And when I started working for myself, it was the same, these business networking groups. And I felt like I had to be this certain sort of person with my shirt and jacket and my business cards and my business plan. And I had to do the polite conversation. It was killing me, and I couldn't do it. And then when I gave myself permission to begin sharing my story, I'm a bit kind of like, let's go for it. So it's like, right, I'm going to write it and publish it, and everybody can read it. It's not just sharing it with this little group of people that I come across. Because in that, maybe it will liberate some other people, and they will feel a little bit more at peace with who they are. So I wrote it without filters. I wrote it honestly. And as soon as it was published, this big wave of fear hit me. I was like, oh shit, what if they read it? And what if this person reads it? What if they read it? And what I found, was that everybody that read the book, all the feedback that I had from everybody that read the book, they all said, I could so relate to that. They said it was so refreshing to read that honesty, and I could so relate to it. And it didn't matter whether it was I remember a 15-year-old girl that had just had a miscarriage, and an 80-year-old Asian guy that had been all sorts of journeys coming to this country, and just every possible expression of humanity, you know? Well, not every, because not every person on the 8 billion people haven't read it, but a pretty broad range. They haven't read it yet, 8 billion. When it's an audio book, I think it will reach a few more. We'll soon be up to 8 billion there. But everybody said how they could relate to it, and it just deepened that awareness and that realization for me, that we're all on the same journey, really. It's all different flavors and different experiences, but there's that perennial element to it. I must look up and find what perennial actually means, but it seems to kind of fit in this context.
Like every year, I think if it's a flower.
Yeah, maybe that kind of cyclical kind of, just recycle. That life and death and compost and growth and birth and all that sort of stuff. So that's Stepping Stones in the Mist, which I kind of, it sneaked out. It sneaked out because I thought that when I'd written the book and when it was published, that was the end. I could breathe a big sigh and kind of like let it go. But it's having this new wave at the moment. Life keeps saying, take it here and take it there, and what about this and what about that? And it's interesting because it has, it's research to a certain extent. It has happened at this birthing of this new thing that's really strong and that's moving in me about my experience of what's going on in the world. Because it seems like that there is there's not that many people that are speaking about it directly. There's the obvious kind of David Icke kind of approach to it. And I was aware that there were speakers today that kind of alluded to it. And the words of Marianne Williamson always echo in my head that say, if when you're speaking, all you're getting is applause, then you're probably not saying the right stuff yet. So I'm aware that what arises in me is a feeling that there's a need to speak explicitly about what is happening in the world, and not for it to be an elephant in the room. Because it's okay. Because it's all okay. Because when we see it from this bigger, higher perspective, and we remember that we are souls, or spirit, or essence, or something internal in these bodies, and that birth and death of these bodies are just a little blip in a much bigger story, or in a much bigger library, then it all becomes okay. Because it seems to me that that what's happening is that it's all unfolding perfectly. And my experience in life is that every challenge that I have faced, every heartbreak, every pain, has always had a gift in it. It has always been life gifting me with a teaching. And it may be painful at the time, but that's part of this human experience, isn't it? We're not here just to have spring and summer. We're here to experience the autumn and the winter. We're here to experience all of it. So I'm slightly concerned that I might waver off too far from the Twin Trails, so I'm just going to come back to the Twin Trails for a moment. Because those trails will pick up whatever it is that I need to pick up anyway, the story, the words that arise will be shared, that need to be shared. So the Twin Trails are a Native American tradition or philosophy. And you don't find very much about them written down anywhere, because I've Googled them and there's not a lot out there. But I heard them, they were passed down to me by a beautiful man who I've heard speak about them, called Mac McCartney, the founder of Embercombe. I don't know if you've heard of him, but if you haven't, check him out. And check him out on YouTube and hear him speak. It's actually not really about hearing him speak, it's about feeling him speak. Mac McCartney. So he was the first person that I heard, the first and only person that I've heard speak about it. But it was another one of those moments when it was kind of like, that's it. That's what I'm living, and that's what I've realised through my own experiences, through my own journey. So the Twin Trail speaks of that in our life, there are two journeys that we are always on. And one of these journeys is the inner journey, the journey of inner awareness, the journey of shadow work, the journey of finding out who we are, going into those dark, scary places sometimes within ourselves, the unlearning, all that inner stuff, meditation if you like. But intertwined in that, kind of in this beautiful dance, is the second trail, which is the trail which leads out and up and into the world. And that is, how we act and how we show up and who we are in the world. And the two are entwined. You can't have the one without the other. And it seems that it's this pivotal time in humanity's evolution that we're at the moment seems to be this dance, this intertwining seems to be key to this, because there was the time, the 60s, and there was this quite a strong sense of kind of like the inner journey and meditation and all that sort of stuff, and let's do a load of LSD and go on these inner journeys without and whatever. And then a bit later, although, it all kind of blends to a certain extent, but then there was more of a sort of 70s and activism and getting out there and doing stuff. And this stuff seems to be a balancing and a dance of the two. And in so many ways, what we seem to be at, and what life seems to be asking from us, is this progression from duality to oneness. So this balance of the masculine and the feminine becoming together, entwined in this dance, this balance of inner journeying and outer journeying of the twin trails coming together and being as one. This journey of expression and love and light, and also honouring the darkness and the shadow work and going into those scary places, which is often where the treasures lie. Those places where we most fear to tread. So this is what the Twin Trails alludes to. And it was what happened for me in my leaving full-time employment and saying, I can't do this anymore. I'm selling my soul and I'm doing it out of fear. I was working in further education with challenging young adults. And it was kind of like, I could see it wasn't making any difference. It was dealing with the effects without touching the cause of the issues. It was papering over the cracks. It was tweaking the tiles on the roof when the foundations of these kids was crumbling and nothing was being done. But it was okay because they were generating a nice funding cycle for the college. And it came to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. And I was terrified of going self-employed, but I'm quite lucky, and it may be to do with the excessive drugs that I took in my crazy time. But I'm quite in the moment, and I can't look forward very much. I don't tend to see the future, and I don't tend to kind of like think about what the consequences of taking an action will be. And I kind of some sort of naivety almost that, oh yeah, let's go self-employed. I'll knock up a quick website, hand out a few flyers, and sit and wait for the phone to ring. And if I'd have known quite what the journey was going to be like, I may never have taken that leap. But I did take it. And I am here. And I'm so glad I did take it. Because it's always kind of like, either the world that we live in or this society that we live in, always kind of like wanting us to find, to get to the next destination, to arrive at the next place, to achieve the next thing, to be successfully self-employed, whatever the hell that means. But, in this journey, what I've realised and internalised is that the journey is the destination. There is nowhere to get apart from, I don't even like the term in the now. It's kind of like just being in the movement, in the flowment, in the whatever's happening, because now suggests it's static. Because it's never static, is it? What's appropriate in this moment may not be appropriate in the next moment. So this has been some of the experiences and some of the things that have led me to where I am now. And if I'm going to share just a little bit about some of these key interesting things that seem to have happened with that deepen my experience that what we perceive with our senses is just the tip of the iceberg, and that, you know, that all this knowledge and stuff that I've read about how, you know, energy vibrating and it's all what's illusion and what's real and what's matter and all that sort of stuff. So it seems to me that where we are in humanity's journey is, well, we're in an interesting place, shall we say, and I would say, in summary, in a way, it's a place of getting lost. It's a place of lostness, and to some extent it feels like humanity is kind of like going through some sort of adolescence. There's a kind of like been an extreme selfishness and kind of like, what about me? And I'm the centre of the universe. But I don't believe that this is the pinnacle of human potential. I believe this is the point where if we were to take ourselves into the future, that we could look back, and we could look back from that place. We would look back and we would say, oh my God, how lost we were. How did we allow it to go on for so long? How did we get so lost? But it's okay, because you need to get lost to get found. And that was what I found in my own story, when I had to be so, you know, I had to hit rock bottom. And I believe that humanity is on that path. Where is rock bottom? It will be different, perhaps in different places on the planet, for different people or whatever. But isn't it sometimes that pain that wakes us up and that motivates us to do things differently? But it seems that there's this kind of, well, I would say that the greatest blockage, the greatest obstacle to the evolution, to us continuing this story of evolution and progressing, is denial. This incredibly powerful thing, which is kind of like, it's such a tricky customer, because it's like, you know, it's like, no, I'm not in denial, you know. So we're in denial of being in denial. So how can we really grasp this thing, when to not grasp it is actually to be doing the thing that we're trying to grasp? So it becomes really interesting, and what the engine behind denial seems to be busyness. It seems to be the key engine or the key fuel behind it. Have you noticed that you're having to run faster and faster and faster to stay still, to keep in the same place? You know, just in my short life, I remember what a slower pace it was. How Sundays were boring as hell. There was nothing to do. It was just like, there were no shops. It was quiet. It was, you know, you had to watch something on one of the limited, you know, 3 channels that you had on the black and white TV. Sunday were pants, you know. But it's like Sunday's like, oh my God, get all these jobs done, get everything done, like kind of collapse, ready for Monday again. You know, you can't just pop round to friends and know that, you know, 99% of the time that they'll be free to stick the kettle on and have time to have a chat. It's like you have to make a phone call to book a slot 3 weeks in advance to make a phone call to have a conversation with them. You know? Where it's just faster and faster and faster, and it's like the metaphor that you use with a toad in boiling water, where they say that if you put a toad in really hot water, it will jump straight out. But if you put a toad in cold water and put it on the gas and turn the heat up, it will stay in the water until it is boiled alive. I'm not sure who's done those experiments, and I don't want to put it to, I don't want to put it to the test. But regardless, the metaphor is the same. The heat gets turned up. The heat gets turned up. And because it's incremental, we don't realise, we don't notice until we can slow down enough and step out of ourselves and look back and go, hold on a minute, what's going on here? So we're so busy because we're never in the moment. We're always on the next thing because there's so much pressure. In alignment with that interesting situation of denial and busyness is this culture that we've generated that has grown up of addiction. I would say that we live in a culture that is infused with addiction. for us to get our external needs internal needs for something externally. And we're addicted to work. It becomes our identity, our status. We're addicted to gyms. We're addicted to shopping. We're addicted to TV. We're addicted to Facebook. And that's not even before we go into the sort of normal addictions of, illegal drugs or alcohol or fags or whatever. We live in a society that encourages addiction. And it becomes this vicious cycle. We were just talking about it just the other day, that the more disconnected you are from yourself, the more addicted you become, because the more you need that external validation to fill this ever-increasing void that you feel inside yourself. And the harder you work, the more money you need to earn to buy the more things to make you feel better, or the holidays, or the new phone, or the whatever it is. And it's crazy until you kind of like just step off the treadmill and go, "Ooh, hold on a minute." And I think we're gifted if we can get off that treadmill before we retire, if we come to that traditional retirement age thing, and kind of say, because we have choices, but we forget that we have choices. So in my own story, the kind of version of that was around my own addiction, and my addiction really was around drug use. I kind of did the sort of New Age traveller thing for about 7 years. So I was living on the road in caravans and trucks and vendors, makeshift dwellings, worked on farms sometimes dealt drugs, sometimes signed on, sometimes stole anything that I could, so that the more off my face I was, the more easy it was to cope with how life was. And it got to this point that I was begging on the streets of Edinburgh. And the guy that I was begging with, who was kind of like my best mate, I found him stood in front of me one day with this axe in his hand, raised above his head, with this really mad, demonic look in his face, threatening to do me some damage. And I kind of thought, hold on a minute, Miguel. It was one of those, little eureka moments. Maybe your choice of friends leaves a little room for improvement. What are the choices that you're making at the moment? What is it? How big an axe and how big a skinhead with a swastika on his neck, with a demonic look in his face, standing in front of humanity, do we need to really accelerate this awakening? Because I don't believe it's the only way that humanity can be awakened. But while we're asleep, and deep asleep rather than deep awake, it seems to be what happens. It seems to be life turns up the heat a little bit, doesn't it? If we're not getting the message, if life is saying you're not living in alignment with your true purpose, with who you really are, with your divinity, with your beauty, with your power, then life will give you a little nudge. And if you don't take any notice of the nudge becomes a bigger nudge, and maybe you get a little bit ill. Or maybe you have an accident. Or maybe somebody that you know goes through something incredibly painful. What is it needed to wake us up? What is humanity's version of that skinhead with the axe? Who in my story died a few months later of a heroin overdose. So in that moment I probably made the right decision. Would things maybe have been different? I could have been sat with him that night when that happened. That could have been me as well, instead of. These little choices that we make in each moment that will determine how our journey, how our life unfolds, how our path unfolds in front of us. So to some extent, it was the fear that began to wake me up. It was that fear of this guy stood in front of me and really kind of thinking, okay, this is one of those potentially life-death situations. And there'd been enough of them already with shotguns and baseball bats and drunken car journeys and etc. But this one hit, and it sowed the seed of, I need to start doing things differently. But I'd been lost for so long that I didn't know how to get found. I didn't know. I began to know what I didn't want. And I think we're at that place where we know in humanity what we don't want. We know what's not serving us. We know about the cruelty that goes on with the children in sweatshops, or what's going on with the amount of children from the refugee trail that are becoming prostitutes and that are going through horrendous experiences, about the animals that are becoming extinct on a daily basis, on about the white whales that we were watching yesterday that haven't got enough food anymore because the oceans have warmed up and the krill aren't there, they've moved to different areas, and the incredible suffering that is going on. We know we don't want that anymore. But while we keep our heads down and just keep busy and keep thinking about me, how do I pay the mortgage? Which is a conundrum, because we do have to do that as well. But it's time, I believe, what's really powerful for me is that it is time for us to begin visioning, imagining how what Charles Eisenstein calls the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. Because if we get into our heads with it, it becomes too kind of complicated. And how on earth do we untangle this mess? Drop the head. Drop the mind. But let's start feeling into it, because I think it was Einstein who said that, in creation there are always two elements of creation. And the first aspect of creation is the internal one, is the imagining, is the visualizing, is the idea, is the inspiration. Something must first be an idea, whether it's a TV or a computer or whatever it was. It was first an idea. Something inside us, something non-tangible, something invisible. And the second wave of creation is that manifesting that, bringing that into the world. So it feels like it's a really important time for us, for humanity, to begin really putting the energy into visualizing what do we want, and not putting all that energy into what we don't want. Like I did on the road. I knew what I didn't want, but that fear, that understanding, that awareness of what was going on was the trigger that enabled me to start thinking, what do I want? What could I have? How could it be? And the second thing that really kind of happened for me, because it was like fear, and I believe that fear is a key part in waking, in the great awakening, in the great turning, in this incredible times that we are living. But the other ingredient is love, of course. It has to be, because love and fear, some say love and hate, are different sides of the same coin. We're back to from duality to oneness. So love has to come into it. And in my story, the love that did it for me was the love of my son. My son was born when I was still on the road. And I remember when my partner said to me that she was pregnant, there was this little spark that lit up in me. And it was kind of like, perhaps this will change everything. Because the drugs weren't working anymore, and I was increasingly depressed and miserable and obnoxious, and it wasn't fun getting stoned anymore and all the rest of it. You just kind of had to do it to be able to cope. There was no high anymore. And it was this knowing that perhaps this boy, me becoming a father, would make me feel like a man. Because I didn't feel like a man. I felt like a fraud still. I felt like a little scared boy inside this man's body. And I thought perhaps this child becoming a father will make that transition for me. What I've since learned is that real change is always an inside job. We can't just change things on the outside and expect that to be enough. I tweaked and toyed with all that, but it wasn't doing it. And so my son was born in a bender, in a tarpaulin dwelling, with a wood-burning stove in there, and under an oak tree in a meadow, so we called him Okie. It seemed the obvious name for him to have, a dweller in the meadow with the oak tree. But it wasn't quite that simple, because 2 years on, I was increasingly depressed and miserable and obnoxious and insecure and angry. And I woke up one morning and I thought to myself, perhaps this boy would be better off without me in the picture. Perhaps I should just walk away. Because of what am I bringing to this? And then I remembered a conversation that I'd had a long time earlier that had said, in my folly, I thought at the time, if nothing else works, I will even go and see a counsellor. And so I found myself speaking to a counsellor with no faith, with no understanding of how this possibly could help this wretchedness and this increasing ill health psychologically, emotionally and physically by this time. Because by this time I had chronic gum disease, I hadn't brushed my teeth in months, I had body lice, the toxins were oozing out of my skin in an itchy red soreness because I'd been eating out of dustbins and I hadn't been looking after myself. And I was in a bad way. And I'm sat talking to this guy thinking, how the fuck is this going to make any difference? And it did. Because there was that love of my little boy, the love for my little boy that inspired me to go and face that scary thing for me, going and speaking to somebody, some random stranger. He inspired me. I didn't feel worthy enough to do it for me, but I thought maybe for him. And then it was the love of that counsellor, because I felt that. I felt love for the first time in my life. The way that he looked at me and the way he just kind of held me in his presence, like I'd never been held before. And he just asked me a few simple questions and looked deep inside me. And I began speaking about what had happened as a child. And I began to understand that the way I'd been living was directly related to how I felt about myself, because I felt so unworthy, so unlovable, so bad, so spoiled, as in, sort of defiled almost. I felt dirty. That I'd manifested unconsciously that lifestyle to reflect that back to me. And there was nobody there to neglect or abuse me. I was doing a bloody good job of doing it for myself. So it was love. The love from that counsellor, the love of my child that accelerated and really kind of made sure that awakening happened, and that began to take me into that new chapter of my own life. And I believe that that's what's happening with humanity. Because there's that candle there. Showed me one time when I saw it that it was sat in the middle of a room and there were no lights on and there was just the candle. And when I started my talk it was quite light and bright outside, but it was winter and it became sort of 4 or 5 o'clock and the light started fading outside. And as the light disappeared outside and from what was coming in through the windows, the candle appeared to shine brighter. It wasn't any brighter. No, I haven't turned up the brightness on the candle, but it appeared to be brighter. And I had this insight and realised that that's what's happening. As the darkness descends, the darker it gets, the brighter the candle will shine. So if you like, the darkness is the fear and the candle is the love. And so we have to have this darkness in humanity in order to wake us up and in order for the light to start being ignited in so many people, which you may be aware is happening across the planet. As the darkness descends, the light gets brighter. It cannot be any other way while we still live in this world of duality. And that is all that's happening. So we can embrace and welcome the darkness because we know it is serving its purpose. Because in that darkness, the light becomes more visible, more defined. And isn't that just what's happening everywhere? In all of our myriad ways. As Rumi says, there are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. How will you kneel? What is your gift? What is the unique thing that you bring? Because that's what we are here for. We are here to find that within ourselves. We all have something. 8 billion people and no two the same. No two have the same gift. And we're here to find that gift within us. And when we found it, we're here to share it. Because it's not enough to do the personal development and say, oh right, I've got it, I've sorted, it's inside me and I'm keeping it to myself. Because that's not in alignment with who we really are. I believe that the age of personal development is dead because it reinforces the concept of I am a person. Yes, you are a person, but let's not put so much emphasis on that. We are all interconnected and we're all energy vibrating and we're all different aspects of the divine, looking, listening, feeling, experiencing through these different amazing, beautiful forms. Life's just so beautiful. And it's so fucking ugly and hideous too. And that's it. That's what we signed up for. You know, it's kind of like saying, you know, well, I just wanted the nice bits. Nice bits are there to serve. And anyway, you know, pain is pain. We will all experience pain. It doesn't seem to be an option as far as the evidence goes so far in my journey and the people that I meet. But suffering is an option. The meaning and the reasons that we attach to the painful experiences that we have, that is optional. How we decide that, oh, because this has happened, it must mean that I'm a bad person or I'm worthless or that I deserve it. It's just pain. It's just another experience. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. So it's time for us to find our gifts and to share them. Matt McCartney talks about, our responsibility. What is your deepest and most profound responsibility? And our deepest and most profound responsibilities are to share our gifts. Because in doing so, we bring ourselves back into alignment with who we truly are, not separate beings. And that may be through random acts of kindness, that may be through theatre, that may be through the work that you do. It doesn't matter how it is, whether you're a road sweeper or a toilet cleaner or the CEO of the company. Because it's not so much about what you do, it's how you do what you do and where that doing arises from within you. Does it arise from a loving, compassionate place? A place of reverence, a sacred place from within you that sees the God and the beauty in each and every facet of this life? Because if it arises from that place, then the difference that it makes in the world, in what we can perceive with our senses, is just the tip of the iceberg. Because when we act and we live and we be and we do from that loving, sacred place within us, it's like a pebble in the pond. And those ripples reverberate out through the unseen realms. What Rupert Sheldrake calls the morphic resonance. Remember that what we perceive with our senses is just the tip of the iceberg. Remember, there is a little story, there's a little Miguel and Miguel's story, and an Anne-Marie's story, and a Sarah's story, and a Janie's story, and a Bonnie's story, and there is this amazing, great big, beautiful story that is unfolding, that we are here. And we are born here in these bodies for a reason. We are here in this room together for a reason. It's no chance. We're here to remember that. Because the words that I'm saying have some value. But can you feel something else in the room? Out of 8 billion people on the planet, what are the chances that we would end up spending this little bit of time together in communion, in connection? Isn't that beautiful? I guess the odds are 8 billion to 1 or something, aren't they? I'm not very good at statistics and stuff. So, as the darkness descends, the light shines brighter. Don't be scared. Don't be scared of the dark. Because darkness is just the absence of light, isn't it? It doesn't really exist. It's just an illusion.